Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court has said states cannot bar former President Donald Trump from the ballot using a rarely invoked provision of the 14th Amendment, overturning a decision from Colorado's top court and handing the GOP presidential frontrunner a victory in an unprecedented case that threatened to derail his bid to return to the White House. Now, this has cleared a roadblock for the former president, who now has legal backing to be on the ballots. There's more in this report.
Colorado's effort to remove Donald Trump from its presidential primary ballots, and on every other state that has made or is considering efforts to disqualify him. In December, the Colorado Supreme Court determined that Mr. Trump was ineligible for presidency due to his conduct surrounding the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. The Colorado's court's divided decision rested on the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, known as the Insurrection Clause, which bars oath-taking insurrectionists from holding public office. In its opinion on Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court said only Congress can enforce the clause. The top court ruled that only Congress has the power to strike the former president from the ballot under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The unsigned unanimous ruling is a significant win for Mr. Trump, whose presidential campaign can now proceed without roadblocks erected by individual state courts or election officials. Former President Trump held a press conference on Monday from Mar-a-Lago, where he thanked the Supreme Court for its ruling.
I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs. And they worked long, they worked hard, and frankly, they worked very quickly on something that will be spoken about 100 years from now and 200 years from now. Extremely important. Essentially, you cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the leading candidate, whether it was the leading candidate or a candidate that was well down on the totem pole. You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly.
With the court set to decide more highly charged political cases on Mr. Trump's immunity from prosecution, as well as on abortion, gun control, and social media regulation, a drop in the national temperature seems unlikely.
Global Affairs analyst Okenfe Liberty joins me from New York on Zoom to discuss the intrigues in the lead-up to the 2024 general election in the United States. Glad to have you join us on the world now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right. Today's event should offer us a glimpse of some of the weaknesses and the strengths of the two major candidates in this election. But just before we go to that, let's talk about yesterday's ruling by the Supreme Court. It could seem as if the court was sort of sending a message that it did not want to interfere in anything politics related to the former president, Donald Trump.
Well, in this state of heightened political paranoia in the United States, which has to do with the presidential election, I think, you know, what the Supreme Court was trying to do is send a unified message, and I think they kind of have succeeded, you know, to a certain extent. You know, number one, you know, it was never really a question of if Trump could be on the ballot. This is what you call a fait accompli. You know, and this decision, quite frankly, was expected. You know, because number one, if you realize, you know, if Jack Smith never charged Trump with insurrection in the first place, and so that charges wasn't even brought up, so it became a question of, you know, does one or two or three states have the right to say a presidential candidate, you know, doesn't have the ability to be on the state ballot? So that's something that I believe the Supreme Court wanted to answer, and they quite, you know, said decisively that this is a question that rests solely with Congress, right? So even within their unified decision, you realize that there were still some issues if the majority conservative justices went too far in terms of how they delivered their opinion, which was unsigned. And then you had the three liberal justices who wrote a dissenting opinion, along with another conservative justice, Amy Coney Barrett, who also wrote her own dissenting opinion. I think they all felt that the decision should have been crafted a certain way, right, that would tone down the temperature. That's why I said, by and large, they kind of have succeeded in that. One, they got the unanimous decision to let the American people know that, hey, this is something that we take seriously, and we believe that this is an issue for the federal government to answer, and not for the states. But in terms of how they reached the conclusion of the decision, that is where they kind of have that's where they had a little bit of issue.
But just before the court ruling yesterday, there were some sorts of questions as regards the fact, questions about whether Colorado could actually make this decision on behalf of people who still intended to vote for this presidential candidate. And even if they have the right, actually, can they legally do this? What's your view on that? The court has ruled on this, but I just want to hear your opinion.
Right. I mean, it is quite clear. It is a federal election. The state of Colorado does not necessarily have the right to ban a presidential candidate who is running for a federal election from their state ballot. Now, if it was someone running for governor, would it be a totally different situation, or somebody running for Senate and whatnot? But, again, this is a federal issue, and we all know about the separation of powers and whatnot. But by and large, I've always been of the viewpoint that Colorado did not have the authority to make the decision that they made. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of Donald Trump or not, but it's just a question of a sound legal principle, a sound legal reasoning. Could Colorado do this? And they had a few other states that were also thinking of doing that have reached almost the same conclusion, right? Be it Illinois, be it Maine, and whatnot. But there just wasn't a legal standing for them to do that. And especially, there wasn't a case of insurrection brought against him. If you look at all the 91 indictments against Donald Trump and the slew of legal issues that he's facing, there's really no issues around insurrection charges that came up in any of those.
Well, the former president, that's Donald Trump, faces about 91 charges and 4 criminal trials. The president appeared in the primary ballots, but this court ruling will seem as that he will continue to appear in other ballots. But tentatively, some of his cases he is to appear in about April and March, which is the time for the presidential primaries. Will this in any way sway public opinion in favor of his opponent?
Not really. This was never an issue of, again, I listened to the clip you played earlier. We all know what Trumpian exaggeration is, and he, regardless of what he thinks that this was a case against his opponent, this has nothing to do with his opponent. This was a case of, people in Colorado and the Colorado Supreme Court, making a determination based on their reading of the state law, right? You had an issue with Maine also making a determination based on their reason of state law. You had Illinois doing the same thing, making a determination based on the reason, based on the reason of their state law. This had nothing to do with opponent, regardless of how he may want to classify this. It was people who brought the cases, and the Colorado and these other states, they made the determination, and then the Supreme Court said your reasoning is quite faulty, and they struck it down, rightfully so.
Well, let's talk about the Super Tuesday. I have been seeing some of the results, but we will not talk about that yet on live television. Well, I've been speaking with a global affairs analyst, Okemfe Liberty, who is speaking to us live from New York. We have a lot more to talk about this, but I hope we still have much time. Thank you for joining us on The World Now at this time.
Thank you.
Now, still in North America, ET's government declared a